Hello and welcome back to the Pregnancy and Postnatal Entrepreneurs Collective podcast. Today we are going to be talking about podcasting with Katy Bolton, who is the host of the Mother Gaia Birthy podcast. Welcome, Katy.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm very good. Thank you very much. So you are a doula among lots of other birthworky things. So maybe tell the audience a little bit about some of the work that you do, and then we'll have a bit more of a chat.
Yeah, so I've been in holistic therapies for over 10 years. I qualified as a holistic practitioner, which involved aromatherapy, reflexology. I prioritized pregnancy massage and fertility reflexology. And then since having my 3 children, I then branched more into birth work, antenatal care, and being a doula.
Lovely. So tell us what made you, obviously it's something to do with your children, but what made you get into this work? Where did it come from?
So when I had my first child, obviously being sort of very holistic and all that kind of stuff, I was very sort of set on having a home birth and it all being very natural and twinkly nights and all that kind of thing. I went to an antenatal course, which is very much set on it, you can breathe your baby out and all this kind of stuff. And I'm not going to lie, I walked into my first birth completely naive, knowing absolutely nothing about my body, how birth worked, what was going to happen. I honestly thought it was just people say it's a bit like period cramps and then baby pops out. And after 12 hours of mooing like a cow and then screaming my head off, I was like, I didn't sign up to this. This isn't what I was told was going to happen. So yeah, I got a bit of a shock with my first birth, but it kind of went along how most people's births do. My second birth, we were actually in lockdown. It was 2020 and it was very, very different. Very, very different. My partner wasn't allowed any of the scans, any of the appointments. There was lots of issues going on, and I was pretty much bullied into having a induction, and it all went very well. I say it went very wrong. I got a lot of trauma from it. I got a lot of negative things from it. I ended up with postnatal depression for quite a long time, and I still even now struggle with it and struggle talking about it, even though I do open up about it. So I was determined we didn't plan on having a third, but he's not unwanted.
That's okay. That's how many babies come.
Yeah. Well, there's a reason why he was born when he was born, because let's say beforehand was Christmas. So yeah. With him, my third, because I'd looked into an awful lot more of how does your body work, how does different drugs work, what does this do, what does that do, all that kind of stuff, I completely stepped back from NHS care altogether and had what most people would call a wild pregnancy and a free birth. So I didn't have, I had 2 scans, but they were paid for private scans just to make sure that there was enough fingers and toes and all that kind of stuff. I actually hired a doula myself. So I had a doula who helped me, and I had a pool in my living room and laboured mostly through that there. It just ended up that the last half an hour to an hour I had to transfer into hospital because of something that I needed a little bit of extra medical assistance for. But I don't see that as being a failure or a bad thing or anything like that. I got what I wanted. I was only in hospital for a maximum of 6 hours, and for 4 of them I was asleep. So you're right. So that kind of it pivoted my point from, if you can have this kind of birth where you're completely in control, you understand what your body's doing, and it doesn't have to be a traumatic experience, even with something like a transfer from home birth or anything like that, then why can't everybody else have this? And it struck me that it's because we don't get given enough information. Either don't talk about it, or we don't get given the information to start off with, or the midwives have got a lot of, like NHS midwives, have got a lot of work to do. They've got a lot of places to go. They can't be seen to be doing lots and lots of antenatal prep for you. And realistically, another thing that I've learned along my way is you've kind of got to take responsibility for yourself. You can't just walk into a hospital in labour and go, here is me, my life, my baby, now you take over, and not know anything about it yourself.
And there's very few other areas of our life where we would even consider doing something like that.
No, you wouldn't.
you know, when we're having medical care, we want to look into it, we want to understand it, we want to know what's going on. When we're buying a house, we're going to go and see lots of different ones. We're going to scope out the area. You know, there's
Yeah.
very few big life events, if any, where we just go into them and think, okay, they know what they're doing. We'll just get on with it. We don't
Yeah.
go to the estate agent and just say, okay, you know what you're doing. You pick my house.
Yeah. Yeah. It's exactly. I mean, like, I spent a lot of time last year looking at cars and things because I wanted to know that it was safe for the children to be
Hmm.
in. I had enough room, blah, 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 blah. It baffles me how there's this weird thing where you just go, oh, well, you're pregnant. The midwives will take care of you. Just do what they tell you. And it's
Hmm.
like, well, not wanting to diss anybody, but they just get taught like the medical side of it.
Hmm.
And it's a one size fits all approach. So they know that this drug does this thing or that drug does that thing and blah, 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 blah. And they just follow their routine. Whereas you're an individual, you're
Hmm.
one human being, and your past life experiences, your body, your everything about you is completely unique, and only you know that. So why wouldn't you go in and go, right, well, I don't know, I had a slipped disc a few years ago, so therefore I don't want to labour on my back. Or, you know what I mean? They're also very
Hmm.
personal things, and you would have to have that information and then be able to communicate that with your birthing team, whether that's a free birth at home and it's your partner, your mum and a doula, or in a hospital and you're having an elective C-section. You still have that thing of, yes, okay, you know how to do a C-section, but I want to be low lights. I want to have
Yeah.
this music playing, blah, 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 blah. You still have autonomy over the things that are going to happen to you and around you.
Absolutely. So then after your third birth, so in that one you had a doula and you felt a lot more in control even with the transfer. So is that what led you to then train or what happened in the middle?
Yeah, so I was already looking at becoming a doula. It was something that I'd kind of had in my head, but I think it was more from my second birth. I'd kind of gone on that mission of this shouldn't happen to anybody, and
Mhm.
it was more like a personal mission of processing the trauma, I think. Um, Once I'd kind of got over that and then sat and looked at it and gone, do you know what? I work with a lot of people who are pregnant or trying to get pregnant or whatever already. Let's just move that out a little bit more and
Mhm.
provide more support. So that it was kind of a natural progression that I was already on, I think.
Yeah, and a lot of people will resonate with your story because there can be so many similarities for a lot of people who get into the work. So, you know, from becoming a doula, from working more with pregnancy, because I know you've been working with pregnant people already, to starting the podcast, what was the catalyst for getting started?
Okay, so this is a really odd story. It's probably not how most people do it. I'd tried looking into doing a podcast before. A lot of people had said to us, like, oh, well, people really want to know about like reflexology or how it works or Reiki or blah, 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 blah. And I tried and I found it really difficult. I couldn't find an editing suite that I got along with. It just seemed like a lot of work.
Mhm.
Um, and it was a lot of, yes, I know I can talk, but I'd prefer to talk to somebody rather
Mhm.
than to myself. So originally, I was just sort of wittering to myself, and it didn't seem to flow right or anything like that. So for a while, I didn't bother. And then someone suggested it to me again last June, July, I think it was. And I said, you know what, let's have a little look into it and just see. It might be an avenue, it might be something good, it might be bring education, that kind of thing. And at the time, Threads, the social media platform, was pretty new. So I thought, you know what, I'll try it. I'll see. So my first post on Threads was, I'm thinking about starting a podcast about birthing and around pregnancy and birth and childcare. Does anybody have any stories or is in that work that would like to guest on it?
Mhm.
Within 12 hours, I had 72 responses. I went to bed that night and got up the next morning on my phone and it had gone absolutely mad. And I was like, okay. So I have literally since then just been working my way through everybody who asked to be on. And that's how I've got to where I am, really.
Oh my God. Yeah, I'm sure that was a bit of a shock. And you're like, oh, I'm not sure I can handle all these people.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I kind of set up going, right, well, I've got a few people. I had it in my head that if I did like a pilot episode and did
Mhm.
12 episodes, like the old style TV
Mhm.
programs, I thought if I get that far and it works, I'll carry on. But as it is, I think number 18 or 19 went out last Friday. So for me, I try and keep it as one a week, and that I can handle. It's not too much. I can add everything else around it. I can do, like, obviously I've got 3 children and I've got my own business to run and all that kind of stuff. And until it starts making me millions of pounds, it's not something I can focus everything on.
Absolutely.
So I try and record an episode a week, even though it's, say, a month or so in advance. But then I edit and then I put up and I launch one every Friday night.
So you started the podcast. It was something you were thinking about, but as you said, you kind of put it on threads, and then you kind of had no choice but to keep going then.
Yeah, pretty much. It was a case of well, you've got all these people who are interested. You've kind of said to them now, like, you'll do it. So that's it. Just sort of, well, not snowballed so much, but just set itself up really well from there. And then as I've been doing it and meeting all these new people, because I didn't really know what it was I wanted to do, I just go, oh, I'll do a podcast. So what I've kind of settled into the pattern of doing, more or less, is doing one week is like a mum's real life story, whether that be positive, negative, anything in between, but about their raw birth story and how they went through that and things that they found helpful. And then the alternative weeks are other
Sorry,
mums.
there is a child at my door. Just hang on a second. No, they have never interrupted me before, but obviously now they are.
That's fine.
Anyway, it's fine. That is the reality of running a business from your house and having children. Interruptions will happen. So
Yeah.
where were we?
So one week is a birth story, and then the alternative weeks are mums in business, like birthy businesses. So whether that be yoga, like pregnancy yoga, or I've had a lady on who's actually a sex, I'm going to say sex worker, but that's not what I mean.
Like a therapist type.
Yeah, she's just sort of like relationship therapy and working with them. Her main thing is sex and what have you. And we have this funny in joke in one of the episodes where she's talking about the different names for vaginas and vulvas and things like that, and trying to explain to people that it's not a vulva, like, because you don't drive them. And like I say, other doulas and photographers and all sorts of things. And a lot of them, you kind of get a little bit of advice or hints and tips on things that you can do in pregnancy or birth or parenting care and stuff like that. There's an odd few episodes where I get very political and get my soapbox out and things like that. But then I'm quite passionate about what I do. So
that's really lovely. So you've got like your birth stories one week and then a topic or a professional on the other weeks. And how have you found the whole process of getting started with the podcast? So you mentioned one of the things that put you off at the start was kind of like the tech end. So how have you found recording, editing, that type of thing?
Yeah, well, one of my, as a lot of the people say, I don't really like saying it, but superpowers is I have ADHD. So when I put my mind to something and I hyper focus on something, I learn how to do something like almost perfectly, really, really quickly. So when I really want to do something, I go one of two ways. If I don't get it straight away, I'll never go back to it ever again. Or I work on it until it's perfect. So now I've found like the editing suite that I like and the bits and pieces that I like and the ways of putting it together. So if I ever do a brand remake or anything like that, I'm going to find it really difficult to change. But yeah, I did, once I found a free sort of online basic editing suite and got the basics down, I didn't find it too hard after that.
So what do you use to record and to edit?
At the minute, I'm using Soundtrap. So, well, I use Google Meet to record everything. That all puts it all into one side and kind of things that I've had a lot of issues with, not having enough memory on my laptop. And my dongle that I had got accidentally snapped in half. So I lost most of my recordings. But thankfully, because they were all backed up in another place in the cloud or wherever the clusters are stored, I managed to get them all back again. So yeah, so I've got about 30 different places where I hide everything now and save things because I'm like, oh, but please don't lose anything.
And I know when I started, I started using Riverside, and it was really good at recording. Or no, I started recording on Zoom, actually, which is what we're recording on now because my Riverside wouldn't work. So I started recording on Zoom, and I didn't have any editing software, so I didn't know how to do it. So I was hiring it out to someone on Fiverr or one of those things. And that was great. I just send it and he'd have it back to me. Like if he was working at the time, could be back to me in 30 minutes. And I was like, this guy's a genius. But once I got software, so I use Riverside now, and I find that really easy to edit myself. So I don't need anyone to do it for me. As I did mention just there for the listeners, we did try to record this on Riverside, but I'm having some technical glitches with it at the moment, which seems to be a new thing. It does generally work very well. So there's lots of kind of different, and that has a free version that works perfectly as well. So it's not as hard to do as it used to be to record and edit, and you don't have to be that techie.
No, I think a lot of the things I think I've used Podcastle before, and there was another one that I've tried as well, and they all are quite samey from what I've seen. And you have like, obviously you upload it, it comes up on a big band, you have one tool that cuts it, one tool that deletes it, then they'll have their own version of like noises and swooshes and bits and pieces that you can drag on. The basics are quite easy, and most of the formats are quite easy to use and very samey. So I don't think from one thing to another, I don't think there's a lot of difference between them. I think it's just more what you personally find better and what screen you like and things like that as well. Because obviously I know Soundtrap work more with like music and stuff like that. Don't ask me to compose anything on it. I wouldn't have a clue where to start, but I know it's got lots of bits and pieces that if you were doing more to it, there's the expansion for that. But yeah, like I said, once I put my mind to it and actually just sat and concentrated on it, I mean, I can record a podcast episode, I can upload it, edit it, sort it. Because once I've edited the audio, I tend to put it into Canva so that it has a background. Because one of the places that I put my podcast is on YouTube, and obviously they need a video. So I put it into Canva, make a very basic video, and then upload it to the places that I upload it to. I can record, edit, download it, put it all the places that it needs to be, and advertise it on my social medias in a fairly easy day, depending on what you were doing and how many you were recording and things like that. But because I can do it a bit here, a bit there, I'll record, say this one. Well, we're doing another one after this for my podcast. I can do that today. I'll probably edit a different one because I know it's going out this Friday. But then on Wednesday, I'll do a bit more to it. Or if I'm putting the kids to bed, I can do my things on Canva so that it's ready to download it the next day and things like that. So I can pick and choose 10 to 20 minutes at a time and fit it in with like my home life and work life and things like that. So it's not like I have to sit dedicated at a screen all the time either, which I find quite nice.
Yeah, it is great to be able to kind of fit it in around what works for you. And when I'm working with clients, with business clients, not with my parent clients, it's a lot of finding out what works for you and what works for your brain, and just being able to do that, like what works for your life and what works for your brain, I think it is really, really important. So when you launched it first, what were the feelings? How did it go? Tell us about the start.
So the very first episode is actually my best friend and her birth story, because I was worried that I wasn't going to get anybody. So I'd actually recorded hers before I'd done anything else. That took some editing because obviously we're best friends and have been for 20 some years. And there was about an hour and a half's worth of recording to go through. So that was quite hard to edit, to get it down to a half an hour and of the subject we were talking about. So I had a lot of kind of emotional and vested interest in it as well. It wasn't just a case of I'd randomly met somebody, we'd had a chat and I'd uploaded it. This was my best friend. It was her birth story. It was really emotional. Her child calls me Auntie Katy and things like that. So there was a lot in it, and I was very much riding on I hope at least one other person other than me and my friend listens to this. Otherwise, I'm going to feel like it's a disaster. As it was, because I was so uptight about it and I'd told that many different people, when it actually aired at 6:00 that night, 56 people listened to it live. So I was like, yay, people are listening. So I was actually glad that it wasn't just me and her listening to it and just chatting, because I would have felt it would have been a bit of a failure. But I think because of that, that's kind of what kept me going, even when I've not had as many views on, say, the first night and things like that. It's kind of stayed the same throughout. And now I'm looking at obviously advertising it more, building on it more, getting more people to listen to it, because I do feel it is a really good resource. I mean, it's free. it's got a lot of things on there. I think it was actually one of my guests said, if my episode just helps one other person who went through something similar, then my job here on earth is done. And that's kind of how I feel about it. As long as there are people who are getting something out of it, and knowing that, especially some of the darker sides that we talk about, because we do talk about baby loss and terminations and things like that. And we don't talk about stuff like that often enough. So if I'm shedding even just the shiny, tiniest little bit of light on someone's dark space, then I know I've helped.
Yeah, and this is why we do this work. We do it
Yeah.
to help people and to hopefully make people's experiences better or calmer, or to help them through an experience that maybe they've already had. But as a birth worker, for you, what do you get out of making the podcast?
Do you know what? I didn't know whether I would like it or not to start off with, and I'm
Mhm.
really enjoying it. If I could actually make my main wage out of my podcast, I would ditch everything else and just do it. Um, I've met so many really interesting people and loads of different, because everybody has a story. Whether you're a mum and it's the birth story that I'm listening to, or whether it's because you're in that field for whatever reason, I just get such a kick out of all of these different people who come and want to talk to me about their life experiences and things that they're helping with, and activities that they're doing and their businesses that they're doing. I mean, I've talked to people from Australia and Canada and Utah and literally all over the world, and all these different things and different points of view. And I absolutely love it. And also, I'm a gobshite and I can talk for England. Yeah, I mean, I really do enjoy it. And like I said, just that knowing that we're making a difference to people, even if it's just one person, I think that's my main thing.
I think it is really nice meeting new people, and it is a really good way to connect and to find out more about people. So I record my podcast. Some of them are individual, and then some of them are guesting. And like you, I prefer the guesting ones, I have to say.
Yeah.
They flow a lot easier. And some of the people I will know really well before they come on the podcast, and some of the people like yourself I've never met before, and we get to know each other. And it's really nice to be able to connect with people who are similar in interest to you, or in the same industry, and like that across the world.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, even like I said, I haven't really been doing it for particularly long. My first episode aired at the end of September last year, so it's only a few months in, but I'm already contacting some people to do like a second episode because we've got on really well, and the subjects we talked about were really good. I'd done an episode recording on Friday, and just because we talk like this and we have a bit of a chatter over a coffee and things like that, it's a birth story, but we actually ended up talking about infertility and infertility treatments, and never got as far as the birth story. So I'm contacting her again today to get another time to give me the birth story as well. So, sometimes it can happen really quickly. And then, like I said, there's other people, other doulas who have really good points of view and really interesting sort of stances on things that I've contacted and gone, oh, well, now because of this. I mean, a good example is one lady who is over in Utah. When I first did a recording with her was before the US elections. So she was saying about different political stances and who she would prefer herself personally to win for different reasons and things like that. And it got a little bit political, but it was very birthy, and it was about certain drugs on like anti-abortion and things like that. And obviously after the election votes had all come in and what have you, I contacted her again and said, do you want to come back on again and give your opinions on what's now happening? Because obviously a lot of things have changed. And she was like, oh, absolutely. I have a soapbox worth of things to talk about. So yeah, so it's nice when you get people who come back in again and give you like updates as well. And you, like you said, it's the connection as well, and connection with other people, and even the business connections that you make as well, because you end up being friends and you help each other out and things like that. And it's a nice little community, I think.
So like it's a form of networking in and of itself, because like that you're reaching out to other people to say, I'm doing this. Do you want to do it with me? And you get to know people as well. So, with regards to your own business, have you found any benefits yet from running the podcast to getting clients? I know it's early days.
Not directly yet. I do have obviously some of the clients that I've had in who say are pregnant and things like that, who do listen to the podcast and who have shared it with other people and said, oh, well, because you're now pregnant here, have a listen to this kind of thing. So again, like I said, it is early days and it's about getting out there and getting noticed and things like that. So I am hopeful that it will reach more people and that it'll bring more people in and things. But I do, like I said, I do use it when if I get someone I've not met before and they've come through the door and they've gone, I've got a backache, I'm pregnant, can you help me out? And then after chatting with them for 2 minutes, you go, oh, listen to episode such and such. It'll be really, really good for you and things like that. So yeah, it works both ways, I think.
Because that's the other thing that you're creating is a resource library. So you're creating a library of resources that you can direct your clients to for more information on different topics that is like whether people are blogging or whether they're podcasting, it's really good to have your own content that you can direct people to because it's going to bring more traffic to your website. It's going to bring more people into your social media. You know what I mean? So from a business point of view, it can be quite helpful at that end.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every time I think I've got social media and marketing and things like that done, something changes and then you go, oh, I've got to learn something else now. So I've been trying my hardest to do things like, like backlinking and moving things around and what have you. I'm just in the process now of actually using the video and audio to put onto my social media. So like little 20-second, 30-second clips of an interview and things like that to put on. And they seem to be getting a lot more traction than me just saying, my pod airs this Friday. And again, I think that's about the human connection as well. If you can actually see someone talking to you, it's a lot better than going, oh yeah, there's a podcast that I might listen to and then forget about. Whereas if you've seen someone chat about an issue that you're quite interested in, you're more likely to then follow that link or go and find them and things like that. I do try and have sort of, say like a month to 6 weeks where I concentrate on one kind of subject, say. And then I'll link everything back. Oh, well, this episode has this on it, or this blog has this on it, and things like that. So you're always linking from one thing to another.
Being able to take the little clip from the video is really helpful. And I do find I wasn't recording the video for the podcast. I am now. So I do upload the video to YouTube now as well. But there's a thing that I love on Riverside is that it creates a little reel. It creates like little reel clips from the episodes. So you can pick which one you want to use or you can change it. So I find that really helpful because like I say, when you just put up, here's the topic, that's the podcast, it's not as interesting as being able to show the conversation or have a, a sound bite from.
Yeah, absolutely. So like you say, you try different things as well when you're doing stuff. So I've tried ones that are just say the different voices over like a pretty picture or whatever. But even then they don't get as much traction as the ones that have actually got faces and people actually chatting. And again, like you said, it's the human connection and the networking with actually being able to see people. So yeah, I might actually try and have a look at Riverside and see that because well, obviously, because the ones that I'm using are just audio only. So when I'm doing video clips, I've got to upload the entire thing onto Canva, and it's not as easy as clipping stuff out.
So if you were to give any tips to any birth workers who are considering starting a podcast, what would you tell them?
Come on my podcast first. No.
No, but that's an important point. Guesting makes it easier to do it yourself.
Yeah, I mean, having that, like you said, us having this chat and thing, I wasn't expecting you to say, well, Riverside does X, Y, and Z. So I've learned something just chatting with you today kind of thing. So it is really nice to have that as well. But yeah, guesting on other people's podcasts, just so you can kind of see like what the setups are for other people, getting little tips and tricks from other people and picking their brains before and after as well. Like, how do you use it? What do you use? How are you doing it? That kind of thing can be really interesting. And you might find that I know one thing that I did when I first started was I had to kind of ignore me because I don't sound like me when I'm listening to a record. It's like, do I really sound like that? So you've got to be kind of prepared for your own voice because it's not the same on a recording as it is in your own head. And kind of getting used to that it can be an issue. But my other thing would be just do it. Like literally just do it. Just even if you only try it and record a 10-minute of you blathering rubbish and then try and edit it and see how it works and what goes on and what have you, because you'll find out a lot more about how, say, an editing suite works or how your mind works or what it is that you want to do by just doing it. basically, because if you don't try it, you're never going to succeed.
That's it. And it's those blocks that just stop us from doing everything, isn't it? It's it's going to be too hard, or I don't know whether I like it or whatever. But if it's one of those things that's sitting in the back of someone's head, then I think you want to do it. So
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
if
One thing that I will say, once you kind of get into it, is don't get too bogged down with like listener views and how many people have listened to it and that kind of thing, because it can drive you slightly potty. And also, like from a business perspective, depending on how it is that you're going to work your podcast or anything in business, like yes, knowing your audience, knowing that you've got a good reach and things like that, and getting your word out there. Obviously, your marketing wouldn't be working if you're not telling anybody about it, but I did at one point used to sit particularly on Spotify because you can make it go 3 times faster than what it normally does. So I'd start my podcast at the very first episode, put it on 3 times faster, and then turn my phone down and let it play through all of them. That doesn't work. That doesn't make you reach better. Don't waste your phone battery.
Now we know.
But yeah, don't get too bogged down on it, because even if you only have one listener, that's one listener more than you had before you started. And
Absolutely.
you have no idea what that one listener is getting from your podcast. And it might be their lifeline or the thing that they needed to get them through whatever situation. Like I think I mentioned it already, if I make one person's life better, then that's one person better than what I would have done if I had never done it. And again, you're not going to get the same person listening to the same episode on every place that you put it. So I know that I upload mine to 4 different places. So you're not going to get, say if there's 10 people, you ain't going to get all those 10 people on Spotify and on YouTube and on the Buy Me a Coffee and on your website, because if they've listened to it once, unless they're binging the whole series again, they're not going to listen to it a second time on a different platform. So so don't get too bogged down on the statistics and the numbers and things like that, especially not when you're starting out either, because it'll make you go a bit crazy.
Yeah, and it takes time to build because there's so much available out there now. It's just a bit of a slow burner, but I think what you were saying about, if you can just help one person with the work that you've put in, then that makes it worthwhile. And then maybe next week it's 5 people, and maybe in 3 months' time it's 8 people.
Even like the really good podcast, but the like podcasts that I've listened to just for, say, like comedy value or anything like that. There's a particular podcast that I've been listening to lately. I only discovered it in the last 2 or 3 months. It's been going for 6 years. They've been doing this podcast since before lockdown, and I've only discovered them in the last 2 months. So you kind of got that thing is your audience is out there. It's whether they're going to find you or not is the other things. But then what you find as well is if you have several episodes or you've got so many series, if people are listening to newer episodes from wherever they found you, they start from the beginning, and then they binge every episode you've ever done. So you might find every now and then you'll get this like massive surge because one person's gone back to the beginning.
And it is because like that, they're a bank, they're there all the time. It's like blogging in that it keeps doing the work for you. So with social media, we constantly have to create new content, and it lives for 24 hours if we're lucky. Whereas with your podcast, that's a resource forever that people can go back to and find you for whatever reason 3 years down the line and then become a listener or a client.
I mean, even before I did podcasts, I did record a few sort of like meditations, and the meditations over time, I mean, they've been up there one of them's been up there for about a year, and people still listen to it, still share it, things like that. It's still people that go onto it, and then they might then go, oh, that was a really nice meditation. Let's see what else is on this channel, or let's see where else this person is doing, or follow whatever route. So yeah, you're right in that it is there forever, and people sometimes just fall over stuff, and it's nice.
So, Katie, thank you very much for chatting with us today about your podcast. If people want to have a listen or they'd like to reach out to you, remind them of the name of the podcast and where best to find you.
So the podcast is the Mother Gaia Birthy Pod. You can find it on Spotify and YouTube or my website. The website's probably the easiest one to go through to get it. So it would be mother-gaia birthworker.co.uk and just go on to the drop down menu that says podcast. They have the last 4 episodes, but obviously that takes you straight through to YouTube, so you can get the whole.
Brilliant. And I will put those links in the show notes as well. So again, thank you very much for coming on today. And it's been
thank you for having me.
lovely chatting with you. And for everyone who is listening, if you haven't subscribed, please do subscribe for more guest podcasts and more individual ramblings from me as well. I'll talk to you all soon.